This is a kinesiological analysis of a free throw shot. Here we have Jill Stevens, a junior at Kansas Wesleyan University. The process of shooting a free throw has 4 movement phases that are all essential to the successful completion of a free throw. The 4 phases are shot preparation, shooting position, shooting release, and follow through. During shot preparation, the shooter should get square with their feet and shoulders facing the basket, have their knees bent in a shooting chair, and have the ball positioned in their hands in front of the body. The shooting position involves getting the body in the correct position for successful completion. The shooting release is the point at which the ball leaves the hand and travels with backspin in the air towards the basket, and the final phase is the follow-through, where the shooter holds the final position until the ball travels through the hoop. During the first phase, shot preparation, the player is in closed chain position with the feet parallel on the ground pointing towards the basket. The player's body weight should be evenly distributed on both feet, making the sagittal plane of the body equal. The player should have their foot on the side of their dominant hand slightly more anterior than the other and placed just behind the free throw line. The player should be in a comfortable athletic stance. The stance position is reliant on proprioceptive feedback from the lower extremities, the trunk, and the eyes to maintain postural balance. The muscles involved in moving and maintaining this lower extremity position are the quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, anterior tibialis, proneals, and gastrocnemius. These muscles act concentrically to move the position and eccentrically to slow the movements. The player's fingers should all be extended, and the wrist should also be extended. The hand should be placed behind the ball to ensure the ball is balanced properly on the hand before the shot is performed. There should be a pocket of air in between the ball and the hand. For this to happen, the ball needs to be on the pads of the hand and fingertips at the most distal parts of the body. The fingertips will also provide important proprioceptive feedback for the position of the ball. The guide hand should have the fingers slightly extended. The ball is held at chest level. At the same time, the shooting hand is placed behind the ball in wrist extension. The shoulder of the shooting arm is held at 0 to 5 degrees of abduction and almost parallel to the body. It must be flexed to approximately 75 to 80 degrees. The opposite arm is slightly adducted and also flexed to 75 to 80 degrees. Both shoulders should be parallel to the backboard. The shooting arm, elbow, and upper arm are perpendicular to the body and should point towards the basket. Both shooting arm and guide arm elbows should form an L shape and should be slightly anterior of the foot. The trunk and hips should be in slight flexion and point towards the basket. The knees are also facing the basket and are flexed approximately 45 to 55 degrees. The muscles primarily responsible for lowering to this stance are the quadriceps eccentrically and the erector spinae concentrically. The gastrocnemius and soleus work eccentrically to dorsiflex the ankle to approximately 10 to 15 degrees with the dominant foot facing the basket. The gluteals and the psoas move the opposite foot slightly into 5 to 10 degrees of external rotation. The feet are shoulder width apart. This trunk and lower body position is important for loading in a power position and for balance. The player's head should be facing the basket with the neck in slight extension. The player's eyes should focus on the entire basketball hoop, preferably the center of the hoop. The shooter's shooting side, foot, ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, wrist, and hand should all line up vertical in the sagittal plane. The power position of the preparatory phase leads to the next phase of shooting a free throw, which is force production. The ball is held in the same position of the prep phase, with the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and fingers all in the same position. The erector spinae extends the trunk while the quadriceps, gluteals, gastrocnemius, and soleus are at work to maximally flex the hips, knees, and ankles prior to an abrupt change of direction to begin the shot. As acceleration into extension occurs in the lower extremities and trunk, the ball begins to raise with more flexion of the shoulder towards the forehead. The trapezius, deltoids, pectoralis, and biceps are working concentrically during this movement of the ball towards the head. The eyes, head, and neck will remain in their position to keep focus on the basket. The fingers, hand, and wrist also remain behind the ball in a position that the ball is balanced statically on the pad of the fingertips with the fingers abducted and extended except at the dip joints, which are slightly flexed to grip the ball. The force required to shoot the ball comes from the extension mechanisms of the lower body and trunk, followed by a sequence of movements including flexion at shoulders, extension of the elbow, and flexion of the wrist and fingers, which will elevate the ball upwards prior to the leaving of the hand and fingers. There is a change to extensor muscle dominance at the elbow and flexor dominance at the wrist. Now the triceps brachii and flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, flexor digitorum superficialis are contracting concentrically to extend the elbow and flex the wrist and fingers. The shooter's shoulder will be flexed until the elbow is superior to the eyes in full extension. The shoulder flexion is approximately 140 to 150 degrees. The wrist and fingers will remain fully extended until the elbow is almost completely extended. More force will be produced concentrically by the forearm through wrist and finger flexion for completion of the shot. The off-arm hand will stay on the side of the ball throughout the shot until the shooting side elbow is almost fully extended. Then, the off hand will then release the ball but will stay in shoulder flexion, elbow extension, wrist and finger extension during the follow-through. No upward force on the ball is produced by the offhand during the shooting process. The offhand does help hold the ball in position on the shooting hand with a direct, gentle side pressure in the center of the ball using pectoralis, latissimus dorsi, teres major, triceps, coracobrachialis, and flexors of the wrist and hand concentrically. The shooting foot, hip, knee, elbow, shoulder, and wrist will remain parallel and in direct line with the basket. A transverse plane rotation will occur at the trunk in the spinal, thoracic, and lumbar segments by using the external oblique, rectus abdominis, lumbar multifides, latissimus dorsi, internal oblique, and transversus abdominis muscles, so that the shooting arm is in front of the body and the offhand shoulder is slightly behind the shooting arm. This is the position just prior to the third phase of shooting a free throw, which is the shooting release. During the shooting release phase, the ball will leave the fingertips. Prior to the release, the offhand should leave the ball but should remain in its extended position to resist unwanted trunk and shoulder rotation during the shooting release and follow-through phases. The ball should roll off the fingertips of the index and middle fingers last. This sequential movement of the wrist and fingers will create backspin on the ball as it leaves the fingertips. The hand, forearm, elbow, upper arm, and shoulder will all remain in line with the basket. Pronation and or supination of the forearm and radial and or ulnar deviation of the wrist will create a side spin, which will change the line of force and rotation of backspin on the ball, which are all undesirable when shooting free throws accurately. The trunk, hips, and knees will be fully extended, and the ankles will be fully plantar flexed at the release of the ball. For most accuracy, the toes should remain in contact with the ground on the release. As the ball rolls off the fingertips during the release, the follow-through phase begins. The final phase of shooting a free throw occurs as all joints maintain their end ranges of motion and muscles are contracting isometrically until the ball reaches the basket. The ankles are fully plantar flexed, knees, trunk, and hips are extended. Shoulder is flexed to 140 to 150 degrees. Elbow is fully extended. Wrist is fully flexed. MP joints are slightly flexed, dip and pip joints are fully extended, forearm and upper arm is in a neutral, trunk is slightly rotated to the non-dominant side, eyes and head are pointing at the basket, neck is slightly extended, fingers, hand, wrist, elbow, shoulder, hip, knee, and foot of the shooting side are all in line pointing at the basket. After the ball swishes through the net, the shooter may relax into a normal standing position. Proprioception and neuromuscular control are critical pieces required to properly control each phase of shooting a free throw. This is the main anatomy of a free throw shot. Here we will watch one in full speed. In sports, safety is always a primary objective, but shooting a free throw is one of the safest motions to occur in basketball. Overall, this is the correct way to analyze a free throw shot. Thank you for watching.